Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are having a look at another devblog for updates groundbreaking, and this is another naval vehicle. It seems like there is a big push in this update for Navy, and that's always nice to see, especially since it is one of the game modes where there is the most growth, which can happen. Obviously with ground forces, we're at pretty much modern day MBTs. For aviation, there's a few decades of technology to go, but with naval, we're not really even into 1945 battleships yet, so there's a ton of growth which can happen with it. This is the HMS Marlborough. It is a battleship of British rank 5, and it's definitely one of those to look out for, mainly because of its huge guns. It follows the same ideas of a bunch of other machines that we've seen in game before when it comes to the battleships, with very strong main armament and pretty weak AA armament, but I'm sure when it comes to more modern battleships coming, we will have a change in that. Let's get the history of the HMS Marlborough. The ship was designed under the 1911 build program, which was the Iron Duke class of the British super dreadnoughts. They were considered repeats of the preceding King George V class, but featured a reinforced to 6-inch secondary battery and also improved protection. The Marlborough was the second of 4 ships of this class to be laid down in 1912, following the HMS Iron Duke, which was the lead ship of the class. And the Marlborough was launched in October of the same year and subsequently entered service with the Royal Navy in June of 1914, just before the outbreak of World War I. And during World War I, the HMS Marlborough faced her most fierce engagement during the Battle of Jutland in 1916, which seems to be a common occurrence with a lot of the machines that we've seen added to the game. Throughout the battle, HMS Marlborough fired off more than 160 main gun shells, the most from the battleships of the Grand Fleet's main forces in the battle, and in return, it also suffered heavy damage from a torpedo launched by a German warship, and as a result of the damage, HMS Marlborough was returned to dry dock for extended repairs for several months before rejoining the ranks of the Grand Fleet. In the remaining 2 years of the war, the ship didn't participate in any large operations, but after the war, the battleship took part in the Russian Civil War against the Bolsheviks and actually evacuated Russian nobility and civilians from Yalta. After the signing of the London Treaty, HMS Marlborough was destined for scrapping. However, before the ship could meet its fate in 1932, the HMS Marlborough was used extensively as a test ship on which several weapon tests were carried out, the results of which helped shape the design of subsequent British capital ships. And because of that, it also means that maybe we'll get a version of this thing which may have some weird and wacky weaponry on it. We'll have to see in the future if that's the case. So when it comes to the Marlborough compared to other machines that we have in game, the main big feature is the guns. The main battery guns are absolutely huge, with 5 twin sets of 13.5-inch turrets, or 343mm guns, not only being a completely new caliber of weapon in the game, but also will make it easier for captains to engage other nations' top battleships because of the improved destructive capabilities over the 12-inch guns that we've seen before. So the fact is, this thing is a new step into what, naval forces will eventually become. What is also interesting is the last time this happened with Britain, with the HMS Dreadnought, it was a very early devblog, and I would say I would class this one as an early devblog, and by the time the rest of the devblogs had come out, the Dreadnought wasn't looking as good as some of other ships. And as we saw yesterday, when it came to a video from the Japan side of things, the Fuso is also coming. Now, whether the Fuso comes this update or comes in the future, that is obviously something which is kind of up for grabs right now. But if we're getting the Marlborough this update, I think the Fuso is also one of those which could easily come as well. When it comes to primary armament, it is larger, but also the secondary armament is nothing to laugh about as well. It has 12 6-inch cannons, or 152mm guns. These are very much similar to what you see in other World War I designs, where they're in blisters on the side of the ship, near the center of it. So they'll be very good at taking out smaller vessels which are near it. And then also, this machine gets two 21-inch underwater torpedo launchers, which are on either side of the ship. So very similar to other machines that we have, where the torpedoes just fire straight, probably, and then you can just fire them out. The torpedoes at high ranks, when it comes to the battleships, don't seem too useful, but at least it's nice to have something extra on the machine, just in case. When it comes to the belt armor of the Marlborough, it also is very nice. It has up to 305mm of armor, or 12 inches of armor, at least in the center. This means that armor-piercing rounds will have a tough time getting through it. Not all of them, because there are still some guns which will be able to go after it. And luckily, with the BR changes now, hopefully, when this gets added to the game, probably at 6.7, there won't be as ridiculous machines, which it will go up against. So everything should be able to pen it, at least in some areas, compared to others. The problem with this machine, though, just like a lot of World War I battleships, is the AA is really not there, unfortunately. The Marlborough has two 3-inch guns in the form of 76mm and two 4-inch ones in 102mm cannons. The big difference between this and something like the Britishcanadianman Comuna, which was added last update, is the Comuna is a World War II refit of the Sevastopol. And what that gave it was a ton of AA armament, whereas this machine, the Marlborough, only existed until 1932, so it wasn't ever realized in the big way of, AA armament. The prevalence of aviation over naval vehicles was only really felt during World War II and theorized before World War II. So the changes to a lot of the machines that you see when it comes to War Thunder, or when it comes to refits in general, took place mid-World War II instead of before it. So as long as we keep getting stuff like the HMS Marlborough, then you're going to end up with vehicles which are not going to be able to defend themselves against these aviation attacks. Now, you still need to be able to get some points together to be able to get into a bomber or into an attacker to be able to deal with these things. And as we go up in BR, when it comes to these battleships, they'll become more and more vulnerable when it comes to, being attacked from the air. And I think generally that's completely fine. There has to be a weakness of these things, and with stuff like the Britishcanadianman, I was kind of worried that those weaknesses were going to disappear. Because once we get those big old battleships from World War II, a lot of people talk about the Bismarck, a lot of people talk about stuff such as the Iowa, because even when you look at something like the Hood, it's obviously nowhere near the same caliber, even though people put it in the same, area. The Hood is technically a First World War ship, if I remember correctly, or at least around that time. But if you have a look at something like the Bismarck, or you have a look at something like the Iowa, you can see the amount of guns that the vehicles just have on them. It's kind of insane how much is, available in that regard. The Marlborough does suffer in a few other ways, though. Obviously, being a battleship, it's not the fastest around. It should only be able to go about 20 to 21 knots, so about 40 kilometers an hour. So speed is not the best thing. So once again, the nice thing about it is that it will be able to get bombed easily. But these guns are going to be no laughing matter for the machine. It should be one of those which I feel does do well in the battlefield, at least until it gets power crept, because, well, welcome to naval. That's basically how all this works. You get your time in the sun, and then later on you're going to get power crept to all hell by bigger and better machines. At least we're getting to the point where the main caliber guns can't increase that much more, and then we'll be able to see the true behemoths that everybody is used to. It'll probably happen in a year or two, but it's still nice to see the Marlborough, and hopefully people have been enjoying the high tiers of naval after the BR changes. I'm sure they made a huge difference, especially when it came to the cruiser enjoyment that can be had. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Professor X 1718, Orange Tail, Sakoshi Tiger, BRFC 15, Teddy, John Ryman, Universe A, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, and then Kyle Kin, Barine, Lafouche, and also Samuel Slick for supporting the channel.